Hi, everyone. So, today I thought about discussing a really interesting topic. It's something I've been thinking about for a long time. It's about the Big Five. And what are the Big Five? Well, the Big Five are five animals found on the African continent that you need to see in order to establish a complete safari experience. So, the Big Five animals are the lion, number two, the leopard, the black rhinoceros. Number four is the Cape buffalo. And finally, number five, the African elephant. And no safari is considered complete unless you've seen these five animals. And so that got me thinking, well, Sri Lanka is a country with a lot of different animals. People do safaris there. Yala National Park, Kumana, and so on are famous for its wildlife. So I thought maybe we should have a big five of Sri Lanka. I would like to propose five animals whom I think should be on everyone's list of Sri Lankan safaris and Sri Lankan wildlife adventures, which signifies that you've had an amazing and truly complete Sri Lankan ecological and wildlife experience. I think number one should be the sloth bear. Now, sloth bears are unique animals found in India and in Sri Lanka. And the Sri Lankan sloth bear is quite unique. They've got an absence of the big V shape that most sloth bears have. And Sri Lankan sloth bears are also really rare. Did you know that sloth bears are responsible for more attacks on humans than any other species of bear? And even though they don't really predate on humans, they cause a lot of human fatalities. And even in Sri Lanka, sloth bears are considered quite dangerous. They're called the Valaha in Sri Lanka, and they're also called the Kalumanyalatta in the language of the indigenous First Nations of Sri Lanka. There's a great documentary focusing on indigenous people's relationships with the sloth bear called Season of the Spirit Bear, and I totally recommend watching that documentary if you want to learn more about sloth bears. Two, I think the second animal should be the Sri Lankan leopard. Now, there are lots of leopard subspecies around the world, but the Sri Lankan leopard is possibly the largest because in the Sri Lankan ecosystem, Sri Lankan leopards are actually apex predators. That means there is nothing bigger than them predating on them. And they're kind of on top of the food chain in terms of predators. Sri Lankan leopards, especially the ones living in the highlands, are quite big and heavy and might be among the biggest in the world, if not the biggest. Sri Lanka is also one of the few places in the world where you can actually very easily view leopards because unlike in the African continent, where leopards are often quite skittish because of other predators like lions threatening them, in Sri Lanka, they're quite relaxed because they have no natural predators, which makes Sri Lanka one of the best leopard viewing places in the world. Leopards are called divya in the Sinhala language, and they're called the Pollejalatta in the language of the indigenous people of Sri Lanka. I think the third animal needs to be the amazing Sri Lankan elephant. The Sri Lankan elephant is actually a subspecies of the Asian elephant. And it is thought to be the largest subspecies of the Asian elephant. So that is to say, amongst all the types of Asian elephant, such as the Indian elephant, the Javan elephant, and so on, the Sumatran elephant, the Sri Lankan subspecies of elephants is considered the largest. Sri Lanka has a huge population of elephants, and they're spread out in different parts of the country. It's also really cool because in Sri Lanka, you can actually see elephants in various times of the year. So it's not a seasonal thing. Elephants are actually visible year-round, depending on where you go. And because the islands of Sri Lanka are so small, the main island where elephants live on is actually quite accessible. Sri Lankan elephants, they're amazing animals. They are absolutely fascinating. They have a complex social structure, deep and rich emotions. They pass down their knowledge and experiences intergenerationally, and they have a matriarchal structure, kind of like aspects of Sri Lankan society. And we made a video about Sri Lankan elephants as well as matriarchy in this channel. Check those videos out if you've got some time. And because Sri Lankan elephants are often in close contact with people because they live in and around human populations, they are actually not just easier to see, but sometimes a little bit less skittish. Although it's always important to avoid single males during must, and it's important to understand and appreciate the dynamics of Sri Lankan elephant herd culture. But because Sri Lanka is so small and elephants are so easily visible, all of this can be done on any given evening. Sri Lankan elephants have a deep meaning and value in Sri Lankan culture. Their existence is deeply intertwined with the culture of the First Nations of Sri Lanka, as well as Sinhalese and other cultures in Sri Lanka. Elephants are called alia in Sinhala, and they're also called Otakandalatta in the indigenous languages of Sri Lanka, which means the being whose head and trunk curves like a mountain. 4. I think the fourth animal on the list of the Sri Lankan Big Five should be the Sri Lankan crocodiles. Now, there are two types of crocodiles in Sri Lanka, the saltwater crocodile and the mugger crocodile. Both these animals are accessible and visible, with mugger crocodiles living in freshwater inland, while saltwater crocodiles tend to live around the coast but can also be found inland. And these crocodiles get massive. There was a case in Matara, which is in the south of Sri Lanka recently, where an estimated 17 to 18 foot monster crocodile was pulled out of a river. And there are large crocodiles all over Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka has a huge number of human crocodile conflict related deaths every year. We've made a video about this on this channel. But that also means that Sri Lanka is a place where you can view these gigantic crocodiles. Saltwater crocodiles play an important part in the ecosystem. They recycle nutrients, they deal with pests, they deal with invasive species and problematic numbers of prey animals. And Sri Lankan crocodiles are also a vital part of not just the ecosystem, but tourism increasingly as people come over to Sri Lanka to do crocodile tours, which means that I think that this can be the fourth animal on our list. Crocodiles are called Kimbula in Sinhalese, and in our First Nations language, they're called the Pitagataletta, which means the being whose back is covered in knots. And that refers to the osteoderms, or tiny bony plates on the back of a crocodile, which have really interesting biological functions, including temperature regulation and also helping the crocodile to create interference waves on the surface of the water so that they can swim beneath the surface without creating a wake. Now, this fourth animal on our list is also really important because saltwater crocodiles do cause a lot of deaths in Sri Lanka. I would also recommend that whilst you watch saltwater crocodiles, you also be very careful about where you swim in Sri Lanka, because saltwater crocodiles are very dangerous and do actively hunt and kill human beings, as do mugger crocodiles in inland regions. Number 5, I think our final animal needs to be something very unique. And Sri Lanka is one of the most biodiverse places on earth and has some of the best bird watching and animal watching opportunities anywhere on earth. But Sri Lanka is also an archipelago. It's a collection of islands, which means I think the fifth animal here needs to be an animal that we can find on the ocean. And I think that the fifth animal needs to be the blue whale. You see, blue whales are found all over the world, but Sri Lanka is unique in that Sri Lanka is one of the only places where blue whales live year-round. That means they're born, they calve, they have their babies, they live permanently around the oceans surrounding Sri Lanka. Blue whales are known to have a very unique and complex language, and that language is different amongst most whales because they migrate around the world. Most blue whales migrate. They're filter-feeding animals, which means that they feed on krill, vast quantities of krill. But in Sri Lanka, blue whales tend to find all the krill they need right off the coast of the country, which means they never have to leave, which means their language, the way they interact, and their behaviors are unique to the Sri Lankan blue whales. And being the largest animals on earth, I think blue whales need to be the fifth animal on our list. Blue whales, amazingly intelligent, but they're also extremely compassionate and caring animals. If you've ever watched videos of blue whales interacting with their calves and other animals, you will see a great depth of intelligence and a sense of purpose in their behaviors. And blue whales and all the other animals on this list deserve our respect and our protection, because much like the human organism, these animals are conscious living beings. They require protection and care. And so if Sri Lankans can find some way of ethically viewing and observing these animals and educating people about the specialness of these animals, I believe we can create our own big five of Sri Lanka. And I really think that if we could market these animals and viewing them as a special experience, it can actually not just help with tourism, but it might even actually help elevate Sri Lankan wildlife experiences to the same iconic status that African wildlife seems to have around the world. And as someone who's passionate about wildlife and animals, I think that would be a wonderful experience to go around the world and to know that people want to go to Sri Lanka and look at these amazing animals. And that will also help with their conservation and help find more creative solutions to human animal conflict. So, to recap, I think Sri Lanka needs its own big five. And our big five can be the Sri Lankan sloth bear, the Sri Lankan leopard, the Sri Lankan elephant, the Sri Lankan saltwater crocodile, or maybe mugger crocodile as well, and the blue whale. What animals do you think need to be on Sri Lanka's list of big five? If you could create a big five, how would you structure your list? Would you have more birds in it, maybe? Or would you have animals like the rare loris in it? Tell us your thoughts down below. I'd be really interested to hear. Perhaps we can even have a big five of rare cats, because Sri Lanka has a huge number of wild cats as well, like the fishing cat, the rusty spotted cat, or the jungle cat. And I've made a video about this on the channel as well. Please feel free to look at that video if you're interested as well. And thank you very much for watching this video. And I'd love to hear your thoughts. And we'll see you in the next video.